Well, good day to everyone, and thank you so much for taking a little bit of your time today and spending it with us here at ManageEngine. Obviously, the topic for today is something that's pressing for everyone around the world, especially those in Europe. And GDPR is something that we definitely need to spend some time on, get organized, get things in place so that when May comes around, we're ready to go. Some logistical things about our webinar today before we get started. The webinar is being recorded, so if for some reason you missed something, please keep an eye out for an email. We should be sending you an email, a follow-up email that has a link to the recording. If you do have any questions as we're going through, I have an amazing team behind me that you can't hear that are answering your questions. So please throw up any questions in your GoToWebinar panel, and they should be able to answer those questions in line as we go through the material. And then at the end, if you have any questions around GDPR, around Active Directory security, really anything around the environment that we're talking about, please send an email to myself. That's my email address on the page. You also probably have an email address for the AD events team. And everyone on the AD solutions team loves to receive emails because it allows us to learn what everyone is concerned about. And if we don't know the answer, it allows us to learn the answer as well. So it's a great way for us to communicate with you through email. Just a couple of other things before we get started. Again, my name is Derek Melber, and I am the technical evangelist for the AD Solutions team, which means that I get the opportunity of traveling around the world, talking with amazing administrators and organizations about Active Directory. I do want to point you to some resources that we have available to you. Both of them are online and they are free. The first one is our blog. If you come to our main landing page and come over here to blogs, you should be able to get information about Active Directory. We have had some recent blogs. Here's GDPR, around GDPR, not only around Active Directory GDPR, this one is about Password Manager Pro. So please come and take a look at what we have available for you. This is completely free to you, and we feel that there's some pretty awesome information out here. So these blogs are very easy to read, very quick to read, and if they don't really pertain to you, then at least you have something else you can come back to the next week. The second resource that I want to point you to is our security hardening site. Our security hardening site is something that was built, again, for you, the administrator, to help you secure your Active Directory environment. If you come to our main landing page, hover over products, and in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see security hardening. This is a site dedicated to helping administrators around Active Directory and securing all of the critical areas that you need to. This can be a very daunting task. I mean, even groups, right? I mean, I was just on another webinar. Someone had 55,000 groups and they didn't know how to deal with it. This is a way you can come in, find out how to document your groups, how to secure your groups, and then be told when the groups change any membership. So very powerful what that site provides. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, my email address is a great way for you to communicate with me, as well as if you need to communicate with anyone else on the team, I can either forward that email or we can share information. So those are some resources you have available to you after our webinar, which I know we don't have a lot of time together. So let's jump into the material. GDPR is something that we here at ManageEngine are trying to develop solutions for organizations now, not just for next May. I currently live in the United States, and I know the pain that you're going through. We've had many different compliant regulations in the United States that most of the world hasn't had to deal with much, such as HIPAA, PCI, Sarbanes-Oxley, GLBA. I mean, there's so many different compliance regulations. And I've also dealt with the auditors, both internal auditors as well as external auditors with like Deloitte and Price Waterhouse. And the one thing that I'm going to encourage all of you to do, and this is the first step attending a webinar like this, is start to get things in place now. You cannot be too prepared for this. The preparation for GDPR is something that everyone must do now. You cannot do it in early 2018. You have to start doing it now, because that 5-month period is going to go very fast in early 2018, and you have to be ready in the middle of May for GDPR. So the preparation for this is absolutely important, but you also have to understand, what am I preparing on the network? GDPR is very targeted. It's very targeted towards personal information. So we have to understand what that means. And then how can we better organize our environment for that? And then once we have everything prepared, what do we do with it? What do we have to do to comply? And the reason we have to do all this is because of the cost. The cost can be extreme. The people that created GDPR are serious. And they're serious because we know they're serious because of the cost. 20 million euro, or 4% of your annual gross profit. That's what GDPR is going to fine you if you're not going to adhere to it. So they're taking personal information to a whole new level, and they're saying, this is important. We need to protect our individuals that are using our websites, that are using our services. If we're gathering information about someone, we have to protect that. And if you're not going to protect that, we're going to fine you. And we're going to continue to fine you until you protect that information. So this personal information through GDPR is extremely important. So in the preparation for GDPR, we must first understand what the ground rules are, right? We have to know the rules of engagement first. And then we have to document the personal data and understand where it's stored. And then we have something called the accountability factor, which is really a multitude of things that we have to consider. So what are the ground rules? Well, we have to understand what defines personal data and processing. So there's some terms, and I'm sure that many of you have read GDPR, and it's a little convoluted and confusing, but there are some terms that become very important, okay? And then we must obtain consent from the people that we're gathering information from. Now, this is where this GDPR really emphasizes a difference compared to previous requirements in Europe. So we have to understand what the consent means, and then we have to have the accountability. So what does personal data mean, right? I go back to these definitions. Personal data, and I'm not a slide reader normally, but to make a point, I'm going to read this verbatim because this directly comes from GDPR in certain areas of my presentation. Personal data is any information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. That's a data subject, okay? So the idea is someone that you are gathering information about that can be identified or identifiable through information. That's personal data. For example, their name, an ID number, location data, online identification, right? Their Twitter handle, something like that. One or more factors specific to a physical, physiological, genetic, mental, economic, or cultural identity person, right? So it's a lot. It's not just their name and number. No. Personal data extends beyond that because it goes back to the person. So anything that can be tied back to the person, really, GDPR is saying is personal data. The data subject is any person related to that personal data, right? So this is where those two things become very important during our definition. Now, processing. Processing is one operation or a set of operations which is performed on the personal data, okay? It can be manual or automated. This is the list that we get from GDPR: collecting, recording, organizing, structuring the data, okay? That's a manipulation of data. That's an operation on that data. all the way down through the list to erasure or destruction of the data. So if you touch that data, that's called processing, and it's referred to in GDPR as processing. So now this master list, every time that you see the word processing in the GDPR documentation, it's this list. It's the full list, okay? So even though it's targeted towards personal data, it's a variety of different things that can happen to that personal data, okay? Now, the consent is really hammered in the GDPR compliance documentation. This is directly from GDPR. Consent of the data subject means any freely given, specific, informed, or unambiguous indication of the data subject's wishes, or which he or she, by a statement of clear affirmation action, signifies agreement. This is important. You must be clear. You cannot be vague. If someone audits you on your GDPR consent and it's not infinitely clear, you are going to be fined. If the data subject can't give clear affirmative action, you're going to be fined. You can't gather information about someone without their consent. So it has to be clear now. It didn't have to be clear in the past. It has to be clear now. The consent must be infinitely clear, okay? Now, there used to be something called the directive, which is in place now, right? Directive left open the possibility to opt out. So if you didn't opt out, you're in, not the way anymore, okay? It shall be easy to withdraw consent as it is to give it. So someone like me, right, if I come to your website, I should be able to get out of my consent just as easy as getting into it. Again, if someone audits you and this isn't clear, you're going to get in trouble. It has to be clearly distinguishable, again, GDPR terms, from any other matters in a written document. So it has to be separated, bold, highlighted, all of that stuff, right? The whole point here is the end user has to be fully aware of what you're gathering, why you're using it, and they have to be able to say yes or no in a very clear way before they give you the information, which is kind of nice. I mean, if you think about it not from a business perspective, if you think about it from an end user perspective, that sounds pretty great. Wonderful. Thank you for letting me know what you're using my information for. I agree. So information here can be powerful for you to actually get more information, but we have to protect what's out there. We have to protect the information that we are gathering, and this is the way that the GDPR is spelling it out, that we must do it. Now, we also have something called accountability. This is quite a list. So I tried to just copy it because I didn't want to use my own words, but I highlighted some things to make sure that we understand some of the key factors, okay? We want data processed lawfully and in a transparent way, okay? We don't want to be ambiguous. We want the end person to know what's going to happen with their data, okay? Once we tell them what it's going to be used for, it can't be used for anything else further, right? You can't collect the data and go, oh man, I have this data. I want to use it for this as well. That breaks GDPR. You have to go back to them and ask them for further consent, okay? Data collected must be adequate and relative for what you need. This is called data minimization inside of GDPR. It's an actual term. Don't collect more than what you need, right? We've done this forever. This is going to be a huge change. If you only need their first name, last name, birthday, then don't collect any other information. Because if you collect it and you're caught, you're going to get in trouble, okay? Make sure the data is accurate and kept up to date. So if it's been a year, you may need to reach out to the people again on things that change. Obviously, their birthday doesn't change, right? and make sure that the information is accurate, because you don't want to be using outdated information. So this is part of GDPR, okay? Keep the data for the time you need it and no longer. When you're done with the data, purge it. That should be part of the consent of how long the data is going to be kept. So they need to know, all right, they're going to have my data for 6 months, and when they're done, it's going to be purged, no longer in the system, and it's cleared. Along the way, from the collection of the data through the purging of the data, everything has to be secured, right? It goes from processing through destruction. You need to take the correct measures to protect this data above all other data according to GDPR. Now, I'm not saying that this is the most important data you have, but according to GDPR, it is the most important data that you have. So we're going to need to use encryption. We're going to need to make sure that things are secured. If things are changed, we need to monitor that. We probably need to set up alerts to tell us, hey, an access control list changed on some personal information. Is it correct changes? So this is all information, part of security, that we're going to have to keep in place. Now, we have the ground rules. We understand the terms. Let's talk about how we're going to get the information. And we have to talk about the setup of breach detection. So adopting organizational measures, right? Technical and organizational. So what you're going to have to do first is identify personal data. This may take a while. This is going to require that you go through your file servers, your databases, and basically earmark which parts of data are personal data. And again, this is where that definition becomes really important. I'm going to highly suggest that you isolate the personal data. If you have data shotgunned throughout your network that's personal data, it's much more difficult to keep track of it and to know what's happening with it than if it's stored in one place. Once you have it isolated from the other data, you're going to encrypt it. You're going to make sure that it's encrypted and it's secured. Okay? Now, the security is the access permissions, right? In a Windows environment, these are access control lists, access control entries on the access control list, the security tab for your files and folders, right? So we find out which data we have. We put the data in certain locations, folders, files, certain databases. We organize it, we encrypt it, and then we set permissions on it. So now we know who has access, and we have it organized in a nice, neat way. The reason we want to do this is we want to track access to this data. Now, what does access mean? Access could mean reading the data. Access could mean modifying an access control list to gain access to the data in a different way. It's really touching the data in any way, okay? We want to do this to make sure that as time goes by, this data is maintained to be stable, confidential, everything is in place, nothing has changed with the data, and we know who's accessing the data. On the back end, we're processing the data. Again, we defined that and we told the user in the consent form what we're going to do with the data. So at this point, we're just making sure that things are organized and secured. But we also have to make sure that we can restore in case of a failure. This could be an inadvertent failure, or this could be a malicious failure. So we need to make sure that the data is completely controlled from inception all the way through deletion, including a hiccup of troubleshooting and restoration of the data in case something bad goes on. But remember, the restoration of the data might be old. So we need to go back to that point, which is making sure that the data is maintained and upheld to be correct. Now, we have some more terms here. One of them we've already discussed, data minimization. But we have this other term called pseudonymization. That's easy for me to say, not really. I've worked on that to be able to pronounce that. Now let me tell you what this is. Again, I'm going to read verbatim from what GDPR says. The processing of personal data in such a manner that the personal data can no longer be attributed to the data subject. Okay? The idea is you want to separate data from the human. So we want to be able to do that. We want to be able to separate those things out. We don't want, if someone gets a hold of the information, to be able to track down that person. So this is the pseudonymization to make sure that we are protecting the human that's involved here, okay? And of course, part of the pseudonymization is data minimization. The less we have, the better off we are going to have to be able to do this, okay? We also have to test regularly for security. We need to make sure that the backups work. We need to make sure that we look at the ACLs, we look at the reports, we make sure alerts are working. We make sure that our breach detection is working. We make sure that the alerts around breach detection is working. So all of this goes into GDPR, helping us understand how to do this. Now, a lot of effort has been given to breach detection, and it should be, because GDPR focuses on it. Two things that I want to mention at first with breach detection. One is you have to put in breach detection. Two, if you don't do it, you're going to be fined, okay? Now, if you put in breach detection and you're breached, it doesn't mean you're going to be fined. If you don't put in breach detection and you're breached, you're going to be fined. So the idea here, and I think GDPR is being very fair, put in the breach detection. If you do that and you are breached, well, they're going to evaluate what you had for breach detection and most likely not fine you, because you took the efforts to protect the data, to know when you're breached, okay? So breaches 100% can't be prevented. So we know that, right? But if we're tracking things, if we're doing the best possible thing that we can around this data, they're going to look at that, and most likely they're not going to fine us when we have that. No one knows where they're going to fall with this. We can only rely on what's inside of the GDPR documentation, okay? So what do we need? We need SIM solutions that has breach detection built into them. We need to be able to go through our event logs, look for anomalies, look for trends, look for things that we know, and when those things occur, we get emailed, right? Two things come to mind. When someone changes a firewall setting, that's a potential issue, right? They're trying to get in through the firewall. If someone has a SQL injection, both of those are very easily detected. So we need to have systems in place that can do that, right? And we not only need to be able to report on them, we need email alerting. We need alerts. We need the big red light to go off so that someone knows, hey, wait a minute, something bad is going on. But it's not just about your firewalls and your SQL injections. It's really anything that can be breached on your network. For example, someone could come in, gain privileges at a certain level, modify the domain admins group membership, add themselves in. Once they have domain admin, they now can access files and folders. That could potentially be a breach. So breach here is pretty big. So we need to take all precautions where possible to look at all the different ways. This is where it gets a little complex with regard to what we're going to implement. But this is where we're doing our research and we're making sure that we're covering all the bases wherever possible, okay? If we are breached, hopefully we're not, but if we are, we need to organize the events related to the breach. You need this tracking, then you need the monitoring, because you're going to have to send in a report. You have 72 hours. You're going to have to send in the aggregated events, organizing them, explaining what happened, explaining the scope of what the breach was, okay? So you're going to need to have the details, where the breach occurred, what was affected, was any of the personal data related to this affected, all right? What's the consequences? Did someone get 10,000 emails and that could be an issue? And then what did you do afterwards to shore that information up, okay? Did you contact the people? Did you go in and fix the area so you can't be breached in that way again? What actions are you going to take? All right. All of this has to be within 72 hours. So you may want to start working on some of this shell information just in case, because that's not much time, because you're going to have to do a lot of quick work as soon as you know there's a breach to find out what the scope is so you can report this to the authorities to make sure that you're meeting GDPR requirements. Okay. So how do you comply with this? Well, we've touched on a variety of different things. So what I want to do is I want to walk you through some examples of what you need to put in place. Now, of course, we only have about 45 minutes total here, so I can't walk you through everything. But let me give you some ideas of the power, some tools that you can put in place easily to set up monitoring, reporting, alerting, and breach detection. Okay? Now, let's start off with something pretty easy, right? Tracking and reporting changes to group membership. Now, I'm going to go into a couple of different tools here that can help you with this. The first tool I want to show you is AD Audit Plus. AD Audit Plus, obviously Active Directory, helps you run reports on changes to privileged groups. Now, there is a built-in report on admin groups that have been modified. So if I have any groups that have been modified, I can actually have reports and also alerts. Here you'll see that I have an alert because the scheme admins group has changed, so I have an alert here. The alert can be in the dashboard, or it can also be an email alert. These alerts are real time, right? Now, what about the groups that are associated with the access to your data? What you want to do is set up a custom report for those groups. Let me show you how easy this is. In AD Audit Plus, you go to configuration. Because it's a group, you go to group, and you are going to create a new report profile. In the report profile, you simply give it a name, tell it group modification, whether they're added or removed, and then you hit the plus sign and add in the groups that have access to the resources. That's it. That's how simple this is, okay? So for your group modifications, the groups that have access to personal data, you'll want to create a report and an alert so that if, let's say, HR managers has access to information and someone goes in to Active Directory and they modify HR managers, right? So someone comes in and says, all right, Bart is now a part of HR managers. Well, you want to receive alerts when that occurs. See how quick this was? You need this. This is part of GDPR. AD Audit Plus is really simple for this. I just did a webinar and I challenged everyone to download, install, and configure AD Audit Plus. It's less than 20 minutes. Super simple, okay? Now, we also need to deal with ACLs, access control lists. Not just groups, access control lists. Now, the groups are placed on the access control list, but we also have to worry about the ACL changing. The group doesn't change, but the ACL does. How do we do that? Well, I'm going to give you some different solutions around this, okay? First, you can use AD Audit Plus. We have file auditing in AD Audit Plus, and I can have reports telling me, right? So when files are modified, I can look historically at when files are modified. Let's do this. Files modified in the last 6 months. Oh, I don't have anything in here. So let's go over here. So this is just a tool. I thought for sure, I'm going to do one more quick check. You can see here that I can change the configurations. Oh, selected objects. Sorry. Let's go to corp data and software. All right. There we go. Depends on what you're looking at, right? So this is where you're going to go in and you're going to basically track the location of where you have stuff stored. Notice here, this is just a variety of places on this server that I have. Once I select that, I now have information about what's changing. Now, these are not permissions changing. This is access to the files, which is another part of GDPR. I can also go in and look at folder permission changes. Look at it right here, folder permission changes. I don't think that I have any on this documentation, but let's go look real quick. Okay, there we go. So this tells me when something changed on a permission. It tells me the date, what changed, and who made the change. So part of GDPR is if an ACL changes, you need to get information on that. Now, AD Audit Plus does that. So does a tool that we have called File Audit Plus. Now, one of the major differences between AD Audit Plus and File Audit Plus is File Audit Plus is real, but you'll notice here that the reports are very similar in terms of what we're looking at, right? So I'm looking at modifications, security permission changes. It's a very similar type of a tool. I have alerts, I have the reports, easy configuration. So they modeled the same way. It's just AD Audit Plus primarily is for AD, can also do files. File Audit Plus dedicated towards your files. Now, finally, if you want to use a bigger tool, right, a more SIM type tool, you can go to Event Log Analyzer. Event Log Analyzer can also be customized. I can go in here and look at Windows events, right? I can look at certain things that are going on my Windows machines. I can customize this. I can make sure that I'm looking at files. My recommendation is to use a combination of Event Log Analyzer, which is really good for anything outside of a Windows security log, and File Audit Plus, which is really good for things inside of the security log on your Windows machines. Okay, now that's the ACL change. I also showed you in that track, report, and alert on access to personal data. Again, that goes back to this issue that we can use File Audit Plus for this. Now, with File Audit Plus, I can set up my reports to be able to look at the information, right? I have my my range that I can set up here. You'll see here that I have information that I can track, telling me when it's deleted. It tells me what actually happened to it. And then I can also set up alerts. And my alerts can tell me when things are occurring in a more of a real-time basis, right? In the last 15 days, do I have any alerts? Yes, I do. And it tells me the details of what's going on with those alerts. You can set critical, trouble, attention. You can also email this out to yourself. So with regard to your group membership, ACL changes, and access to personal data, AD Audit Plus and File Audit Plus are perfect for this, to track, report, and alert to you when things are going on, okay? But you also need to detect breaches. Now, with regard to the breach detection, hold on one second. Okay, I just wanted to look if there were some questions coming through. Those are being answered, thank goodness. So let me jump into this whole idea of breach detection just to give you some ideas. Now, I've already showed you inside of AD Audit Plus, if you're breached with a group membership change, you can get that information immediately. But what about something else? Let's say that it's deeper, it's beyond a Windows machine. Well, let's say that you have the need to track, let's say, a firewall change or a SQL injection. I have both of those set up here. So what you want to do is you're going to want to, hold on, let me log back in here. You're going to go in here and you're going to be able to see in our dashboard of Event Log Analyzer things that are occurring, okay? I can look at my devices, I can look at my applications, and I can see things pretty much in real time that are going on. Now, you'll notice here that this is my Apache server, and I have some things that are going on with it. I can click on this and I can be sent directly to what's going on to this Apache server. Since it's an Apache server running a database, it could be a SQL injection. So this is where I can immediately see things that are going on, but this is more manual. What I want to do is I want to build you up to how you're going to set things up in terms of getting alerts for breaches that are occurring, okay? Now, what you're going to do first is you're going to go over to settings, and this is almost any tool has to be set up for this, and you're going to set up your devices, okay? Now, the devices really become your servers, right? So here you can see that I have a list of my servers. I can add devices. Here you can configure manually, so I can go in and add these things in. I can look for them on the network. I have Windows devices, 6-log devices, a variety of different things that I can set up. Once I have the device set up, that's when I need to go in and set up the source, right? The application source. Well, the application sources, for the most part, is going to be, let me just give you the configuration here, right? You have an Oracle database or you have a SQL Server database. So you're going to set those up. So I have those particular things already set up, right? So for my devices, I also have my application set up. Now, for these, once you have them set up, you're going to have reports. And under your reports, you're going to be able to look at particular things that are happening for your applications, right? So I set up an Apache, and I can come in here and look at web server attack reports, SQL injection reports. So here, what I want to do is I want to look at the last 30 days, and you will see that I had a SQL injection reported in the last 30 days. I have this because the tool is looking for this. Because I have the device that has an Apache server, this is getting me the information that I need. This actually gives me the details. This is actually the command that was run for the SQL injection. So now I have the details around what's going on, helping me understand. This is going to be vital when you have to document what's going on. Now, because this is in a report, I can easily set this up through the alert, very similar to what I showed you inside of AD Audit Plus. Notice AD Audit Plus, File Audit Plus, and Event Log Analyzer all have reports, and alerts can be associated with those reports, including thresholds, okay? So now that I have these particulars, right? I have these areas that I'm actually getting information about breaches, right? So these are attacks for Apache. Here are my Windows machines, and I can look at particular failures and attacks within Windows machines, right? So antivirus things that are being set up. Windows firewall auditing. If I have a modified rule, it's going to tell me that here. I can go to Unix machines. I have applications I can look at. So what we have done is we've built for you default reports, helping you install and immediately, once you configure the device and the application, start looking at that. Then you can set up the alerts based on what you need to set up. Now, inside of my alerts, right, you'll see here that I have alerts that tell me what's going on. So my alerts tell me, right, all of my alerts are right here, tell me the situation that's going on. This is the same information that we had from the other review, but this tells me all of them, not just those for, let's say, Apache. So all of them would be listed here. Now, when I go into my certain configurations, I can also set up profile-based alerts, right? So this is where my breach detection is going to be listed out. And I can go in and I can look at my profiles and modify them. We have documentation to help you set this up. You don't have to start taking screenshots of this. We're going to walk you through this. So let's say, for example, my Apache SQL injection alert profile. I configure the machines that's running that database. And then down here, this is where I set up my thresholds. I set up my emails. I can actually run programs, right? Part of the idea of breach detection is taking action. So I can actually run programs. I can do certain things. I can send out SMS. So I can do SMS. I can do email notifications. So this is where you go in and you set up that alert profile. The alert profile is going to be based on things that are recurring, such as in this case, a SQL injection. Okay? So again, in Event Log Analyzer, I set up devices and applications. Once I have those set up, I set up the reports associated with alerts. In the end, the benefit that you have is you're going to be able to receive information that's going to help you understand the breach occurred, as well as you can even receive email notifications telling you things are occurring. So from the beginning to the end, you need things that are going to tell you what's happening in the background. That's the biggest issue with regard to GDPR, alerting and notifications. You have to know when things are occurring. So what we've done is we've walked you through basically the foundational concepts and definitions of GDPR, helping you organize and determine where that data is, and then giving you some rules, both best practice rules and GDPR rules, to organize that data. You want to isolate it, you want to secure it, you want to encrypt it, you want to put up monitoring, you want to do all these particular things. Then we went in and we showed you in AD Audit Plus, File Audit Plus, and Event Log Analyzer the ability to report and alert on group changes, ACL changes, file access, even down to breach notification. I showed you how to set up the device, set up the alert, and what the alert looks like. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is, as you can see here, there are many different tools that we're talking about, okay? So the different tools are available from our website. You can go to our website, point you to our website right here, and from our website, go to products, and you see the products here. Download is super simple, install is super simple. We also give you some guidelines on how to set up the tools to meet GDPR. If you email itsecurity.solutions@ManageEngine.com, you can receive some of those tidbits of information. In the follow-up email, we will add you links to that to help you better understand GDPR and how to set up the tools for GDPR. My recommendation is to test. Test now. You have to test these things now, because when it comes down to May, everything has to be in place, okay? Now, I see a hand raised. Let's see what this is. But I don't see any more questions. So I think all the questions have been answered, okay? If for some crazy reason we didn't get to your question, or there's an outstanding question that you have, that's my email address. That's an email address that you can use. Please inundate us with questions. This is new to all of us. We may know some things that you need to make sure that you're GDPR ready. Email us. We'd be more than happy to send you documentations or simple answers to questions that you have. This is a way for us to communicate and for all of us to be GDPR ready when it comes May. So I don't really see any further questions coming through. So with that, I'm going to have I'm going to allow you to get back to your work, and we're going to end this. Again, this has been recorded. You should receive an email with a link to this in the next couple of days. Please keep a lookout for that. We will have follow-up GDPR webinars in the next couple of months, so keep out an eye for those. And I want to thank my other AD Solutions team members for helping me out with questions and the answers. I want to thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, please email us. And with that, I'm going to let you get back to work. And thank you, and have a great rest of your day.